Testing, testing. I'm green as well. Green and yellow. Good afternoon, everyone. Very pleasant welcome to those joining us online on Andrew's YouTube channel and also the EJC YouTube channel. This evening for our AY program, we have a very interesting program lined up for you. It is another in our health series, and we'll be talking about things that are hijacking our health. But before we get into the program, let us just pause for a word of prayer. Shall we bow our heads? Our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for life and for health and strength. As we gather in your sanctuary, along with those persons who are joining online, I pray that you will be with us here, with the program, with the moderators. I pray that this program will be very informative, and it will reach persons in need of help. Thank you once again, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. So, this evening, we're looking at things that are hijacking your health. And in fact, this is only the first part of a two-part program looking at things that are hijacking our health. Now, with me, we have a very distinguished panel. Starting from my immediate right, we have Mr. Daniel Brown. And then beside Daniel, we have Miss Yuki Atkinson. Uki, I'm sorry. Okay. Uki Atkinson. And then beside her, we have Dr. Craig Radlin. Welcome. Just a little more in terms of introduction, Mr. Daniel Brown is a substance abuse officer with responsibility for Kingston and St. Andrew, Kingston and St. Andrew National Council on Drug Abuse. He has also been working in the mental health field for over 2 decades. That's a long time. And he specializes in adverse childhood experiences. Yuki, can I call you Yuki? Uki. Is a research analyst at the National Council on Drug Abuse for the last 11 years. She's responsible for national studies on the drug situation in Jamaica. She has worked in the field of research for over 25 years on child and adolescent health, education, HIV and drug abuse. She's also an adjunct lecturer at the UA Department of Child and Adolescent Health. And Dr. Craig Radlin is a consultant psychiatrist at the University Hospital. So welcome all. Now, hijacking your health, things that are hijacking your health. When I looked up the word hijack, does anyone know what hijack means, what the origin of hijack means? It was very interesting. Apparently it comes from the days of the prohibition in terms of alcohol prohibition, when alcohol was banned. And there was a lot of infighting between rival gangs. So when one rival gang wanted to hijack another rival gang's truck filled with bootleg alcohol, the gang leader or the gang member would go up to the driver and say, "Hijack." And he was very disarming. He, friended up the person, and before he knew it, it was a gun in the guy's face. And you know what happened afterwards. So there are certain things that come up in front of us, okay? And they're very disarming. And it is too late sometimes that we find out what these things are when they already have control. So I found that very interesting. But this evening we're going to be talking about addiction, just in case you couldn't figure out by the persons who we invited here. And before getting into addiction, we'll talk about a little bit about how we form habits and pleasures and things that make us feel good and how this leads to addiction. But maybe we'll start off by asking the panelists or someone from the panel to give a definition of what addiction is. Can someone who wants to start off with that?
All right, I can start off. Addiction really represents a complex set of behavioral, abnormal behavioral patterns where you're engaging in usually unhealthy behaviors. Despite the reward, initial reward, it's in the long term an unhealthy thing. So you're engaging in complex behaviors or engaging in use of substances in particular. So in this context, in the modern age, you can be addicted to social media, you could be addicted to substances, to pornography, to gambling. There are various things now that you can be addicted to, which are engaging the pleasure system, the reward system of the brain, but it ultimately is a harmful one.
So I assume that we don't all start off by engaging in harmful activities, because if we see something walking around that says, this is bad for your harm, most of us would avoid it. You mentioned something about the pleasure system. You want to elaborate some more on that, Dr. Radlin, or
right? So, all right.
else?
So, what was mentioned a little earlier, how we are made. Our bodies and minds are made in such a way that we are designed to engage in healthy behaviors, and our body and mind rewards us by the release of dopamine, and that neurotransmitter makes us feel happy. So, for instance, if you're hungry, and you then eat something that satiates, that satisfies that hunger, your body rewards you by releasing certain hormones that reinforces this behavior. Even using the bathroom. You ever realize when you have that urge and you hold it and you eventually release to use the restroom?
Wonderful.
You feel euphoria. The body is designed for that. But unfortunately, there are scenarios in which this pathway can be hijacked, as you say, where the priority moves away from healthy decisions, healthy behaviors to unhealthy ones.
Okay, thank you very much. Daniel, can you elaborate on some different kinds of addictions that we may have?
All right, so I'm going to break it down in two parts. I'm going to talk about physical and behavioral addiction.
And more volume on his mic.
Sorry, so we're talking about physical and behavioral addiction. So, for example, addiction to a drug, right? And that is more physical, whether to cigarette, to ganja, to alcohol. And then you have behavioral, which is behavioral to like exercise, eating, sex, shopping. All of these different things affect you in different ways.
Did you say shopping?
Yes, you do have some shopping addiction about the place.
I won't call any names.
Yes.
I thought that was called retail therapy.
Right. So basically, those can hijack. It's your way of dealing with stress. You know. So those are some of the addictions what we can talk about.
Okay, great.
I think it's also important for us to recognize that, particularly with substance use, there is a progression in terms of the level of, well, prior to reaching addiction, so that most people start with experimentation, and they may not advance to regular use. After experimentation, there are those who use within social settings, they use it for leisure activities, and then there are those who use it in a problematic manner, use it in a way that, despite the social consequences, despite the fact that it is affecting their work or their academic performance, they're still, persisting their use. And then it goes on to addiction, where the brain, the neural pathways of the brain have literally been changed. So it's not that everybody who uses is, automatically there's a problem. It is generally a progression that takes place. And there are people who have a higher likelihood by virtue of...
Risk profile.
Risk profile, that's a good word. By virtue of their hereditary nature, or by virtue of the things that they're facing around them, they may be at a greater risk of becoming addicted to substances than others.
That's very interesting. Anybody else wants to elaborate on it? How would I know whether I am at risk of addiction more than others? Is it something I can know myself, or what?
Well, there's we call it epigenetics and genetics, where persons, you might even have a family history of substance abuse, so it's being role modeled in the house. There are persons who are exposed to stress. Stress levels, especially in the youngsters, are associated with the increased risk of engaging in the reward pathway and abusing that pathway and becoming addicted. There's a long list. Can't remember all of them though, but children who are impulsive, certainly age group. So this is why, from a public health perspective, we want to ensure our children don't start engaging in unhealthy behaviors, because how their brains are developing, the reward center is much more hyperactive than the area that controls their executive functions. So the spot in the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain that allows you to make decisions, to decide to make healthy choices, that is slow to develop, as opposed to the centers in the brain that you get the pleasure. So you find that you have much more sensation-seeking behaviors in the youngsters, and hence why the youngsters are more at risk. And so they're more at risk of long-term addiction and harmful behaviors.
Is this why advertising companies target our teenagers with things like alcohol ads and cigarettes and things like that? Is this why?
Yes, look at it from a marketing standpoint. The earlier you can get somebody to start on your product is the longer you can make certain money off of them. So you start them out early, and then you have a lifelong contributor to your company, right? I think back in the couple years ago, associated with the cigarette company, they used to have particular jingles while they're associated with children. So once you get started earlier, then the likelihood is that you're going to be hooked on this particular product for a long time.
And if I may just add, in particular vaping, so, tobacco use, traditionally we know that cigarettes...
Tell us what vaping is, just for those who may not know.
So vaping is electronic nicotine delivery systems, ENDS. You also have electronic nicotine, non-nicotine delivery systems. Our young people, not only in Jamaica, but across the Caribbean and across the world, vaping has now become very popular. And the marketing that they undertake particularly focuses on young people, where the flavors that they have, there are over 17,000 flavors. They use raspberry, strawberry. It's easily accessible right here in Jamaica. Our young people have told us that they can go into convenience stores. Nobody is asking about their age. You're supposed to be 18 and over to be able to purchase those products. But the accessibility, both in person and online, the way that it is marketed, as well as the perception that it's not risky, because it is marketed as a healthy alternative to cigarettes. Tobacco, yes. Right.
And it's very colorful. So if you look at the package, remember, color attracts you. When you see it, well, I instantly see this thing and light up certain receptors, right? So now it more gravitated to children. I recently was in Papine, and I saw some grade 7 students from a particular school came inside of the gas station to purchase the vaping. I think it was for $1,500.
Did you say grade 7?
Yes, grade 7. So
that's like 13-year-olds?
13, so I think Mrs. Atkins, we are primary school students, so we're talking about different age group. So the earlier you get started, the likelihood you also move on to something else. So the point I want to bring up is this, is that these students save their money in order to purchase the vapes, right? And that is $1,500 to $2,000.
Don't eat any lunch, or eat crackers and then...
Right. So basically, that's what we're talking about.
So what is the extent, okay, I know we're honing into substance abuse right now, but this is where the conversation is going. Do we have any idea as to the extent of substance abuse, let's say in our children and in our adolescents in Jamaica? Do we have that data?
Absolutely. We do a number of studies among the general population, among the secondary school population to determine the scope, the kinds of substances that are used. There is a Global Youth Tobacco Survey, the Global School-Based Health Survey, the National Household Survey. We do surveillance among people who are in treatment settings, and we have also done surveys among persons who are incarcerated to determine the relationship between drug use and crime. So we have a good idea of what's going on. What we know from successive studies is that alcohol is a drug that is most widely used by Jamaicans and most people across the world. So 80% of Jamaicans between the ages of 12 to 65 have used alcohol at some point in their lifetime. Those who use it currently, this is from the 2016 National Household Survey, current use relates to have you used within the past 4 weeks. 40%, that's 4 in 10, report that they have used alcohol in the past 4 weeks. When you look at things like tobacco, across the general population, 11% of our population report that they have used report that they currently use cigarettes, and it's significantly higher among males than females for all drugs. Cannabis, ganja, marijuana, 30% of our population have used it at some point in their lifetime, and 16% report current use. Now, when you look at drug use, you don't only look at current and past year and those kind of things. You also want to be able to determine what proportion of the population uses these substances in a problematic way, because those are the people who really need help. And so when we look at things like problematic alcohol use, it's 16% of our population that report using it in a way that affects their lives negatively.
Elaborate on that a little more in terms of problematic use, because some persons may say, okay, I am a social drinker. I only drink a glass of wine, before bed every other night or something like that. So to explain a little bit what problematic use is. Anyone wants to take that one on?
All right, so let's say problematic is where a good example is we have something we call the Drink Right campaign, right? Where you say let's say your body up to a person, let's say 10, I'm just giving a figure, about 10 alcohol beverages over a period of a week, right? You have some persons who go up to 15, 20, 30. Some person will sit on how we call them binge drinker, will go to an event and drink 4 or 5, up to 10 units per setting. So that would be more problematic, what we're talking about.
I mean, just to expand on that, if you stop drinking alcohol and you're noticing that you're having withdrawal symptoms, you're sweating, you're craving, you can't do without the substances, that you're problematic. And certainly if you're drinking, you're driving, you're unable to function at work, you're getting into fights, you're becoming jealous. With respect to alcohol, it starts to impair how you relate to your family members, your workplace. You're certainly in problematic drinking, problematic use. In the medical world, we'd call it an alcohol use disorder.
Okay.
Right.
How would you define problematic use of marijuana? Is there any such thing?
No, the same, using the same framework. If you're having withdrawal symptoms, if you're having psychological side effects, if you're using and you know it's harmful and you're still using it, you know it's impairing your function, you're still using it, you're certainly, as I said, using all those criteria, you're in problematic use.
And there are ways in our surveys that we can measure those. So for cannabis, we use the cannabis abuse screening test, where you ask a number of questions like, as you get up in the morning, do you need to smoke? Or do you smoke by yourself? Or do you feel like if you're not smoking, there's, something is missing? What we found in our NHS in 2016 was that 50% of the people who smoked cannabis in the past year, were at risk for abusing cannabis. So it gives you a profile of the kind of behaviors that create a risk for becoming a problematic user. For alcohol, we use the alcohol use disorder identification test audit. And that's where we got the 16% of our population needing help for alcohol use.
Okay, thank you. So what we spoke about a little bit about alcohol and cannabis and marijuana. Are there any other drugs that we see being used in our children or in our adolescent population in our schools? What do we know about this?
Okay, so I can start. Last year, we did a rapid situation assessment. Once the students were back in school in March, April, we got increased reports about, confiscations at school. There was a report out of St. Catherine about students having pill parties. A number of things were raised. So we went out, in the absence of doing a national secondary school survey, we went to 13 parishes and conducted focus group discussions among 160 students across the island. The only parish we didn't go to was St. Thomas. Not because of the roads, but so out of those focus group discussions, we also interviewed guidance counselors. It was apparent that the most popular substances that young people spoke about were MDMA, which is Molly, ecstasy, vaping, as well as edibles. Now, this is not to say that alcohol was no longer popular, but they spoke about being able to access Molly, MDMA, And you can
And any other names for Molly?
ecstasy.
Okay.
And MDMA. MDMA is a whole 29 long word. Methylene, dioxy, methamphetamine, long word. But the point is that across the board, it's not confined to the West or confined to a particular socioeconomic group. It was across the board, rural, urban. Our young people were able to tell us how the pills look, how they can get them, what the impact is, how people use it. It is clearly now becoming a part of our reality. So the types of substances are changing, and this is something that is happening in other Caribbean islands as well.
Give us the figures, though, from that research. How many, what
so
percentage?
It was qualitative. It was qualitative.
Okay.
It was focus group discussions. I can say that we will shortly be able to tell what the scope is among the general population, because we're currently doing another national household survey among 12 to 65-year-olds. And we made sure to put Molly in there because we know that people are using it across the island.
Okay.
So right now we don't know the scope, but we know that it is a reality. There are Molly parties. There are parties that you can't go in unless you take a Molly pill, or you pay a fee and you get Molly all night. I mean, it's with us.
And the next point that I should also bring up is this, is we're now in a digital era, right? So you can do, most youths or adults can simply go on Instagram or some other platform and order it online and it's delivered to you. So you don't have to go looking for it, actually they'll take it to you now. So that's where we're at.
Okay, so let's say that, and I am a parent. Let's say I'm a parent and I have a 14, 15, 16-year-old at home. Are there any telltale signs that I should be looking for that may indicate that my child is abusing a drug? You know, obviously you don't want to go out and accuse a child and that kind of stuff, but what are some of the telltale signs that may indicate that your child has an substance abuse problem?
All right, so so I'll just name a few, right? For example, isolation. They start to isolate themselves. They start to change the peers they normally hang around with. The grades may be going down, not taking care of their hygiene, not taking care of themselves. So these are just a few of many different things, right? I think parents know their child best. So once you see something start to change, there's something going on with that child. So we just need to have start the conversation just to see exactly what is going on.
Maybe to add to that, fall in grades, irritability, even depression. If you start to see them talking to themselves, because so many of these substances are associated with comorbid mental illnesses. So if you start to see other signs of abnormal behavior in a child, you should get the child assessed quickly.
Okay.
I recall somebody came to our office after we disseminated the information about Molly use among students and tried to put out that, parents need to be more vigilant. We got a call from a parent who said that his daughter had, all of a sudden, she was no longer communicating with the family. She was in her room. She was crying a lot. For days, she wouldn't eat. And when they were trying to find out, what's happening with you, eventually they found out that herself, the neighbor, and a number of other young people in the area were using Molly. He said it lasted, that kind of behavior lasted for about 7 days. And then after that, she was, normal again. And then she explained that they got it from school and there are people who are basically supplying it to students. So we have concrete examples. We also have examples where people have been unknowingly drugged, where they go out with others and somebody puts it in their drink and they don't know, and they were sexually assaulted. And they only knew about that when they saw videos the following day, or only knew that their behavior was totally unacceptable and unlike them after they were able to see some of the things that, we video everything nowadays, right? Or some people, not we, but some people are putting everything on social media. So it is very important for us to realize, particularly our young people, the dangers that can occur when they go out with people and they're not vigilant in terms of looking, you don't take a drink from anybody. You don't allow people to go away with your drink and come back with it. There are some serious things that we need to be explaining to our young people, especially as parents, so that they understand the risk that they're at.
That's very important. So let's say that I have my child. I suspect that my child is using one of these things, Molly or edible or something like that. What do I do next?
All right, well, we offer drug testing at the National Council on Drug Abuse. So if you suspect your child may be using a substance, we can offer that service right there for a small little fee.
Yeah, and we would also, we also offer counseling. We would encourage parents not to freak out. You understand what I'm saying, right? Usually when parents find out these things, the automatic reaction is, how could you be doing this? What are you doing? You need to stop. If you allow your child to talk to you and tell you what the circumstances are, tell you about their friends, tell you about what happened and what's happening in their lives, because there's always a reason why young people use substances, Whether it is because they're being influenced by their friends, whether it is because they're using it to cope with a particular situation that they're unable to cope with. There's a variety to feel better, to do better, to fit in. We want to be able to find out what that issue is before we can help.
Yeah, like whenever a child is brought to me and they say the child is smoking ganja, my question is why? Because sometimes it's a symptom of a problem. So we need to get to the root cause, and if we deal with the root cause, then we deal with the smoking itself. Because the reality is most of our children today have low to no coping skills. How do I deal with stress? How do I manage stress when I don't feel well? Right? So we have a serious problem now, what we need to address. So our thing is to help them to understand so they can help emotional regulation, as taking care of themselves, taking care of themselves. So we have to assist them with that, because we do have a serious problem when it comes to I am not well, especially with our children.
And it would seem that prevention is always better than cure. So it is imperative that parents and caregivers try and impress upon their children the importance of these skills, these coping skills, before you get into a scenario where someone is already using a substance and you're trying to play catch up afterwards. Yes?
Absolutely. So in the home environment, it is encouraged that you start to speak with your child about these things before other people tell them. In an age-appropriate manner. So you don't tell a 6-year-old that cannabis came from the Indians and you keep it age-appropriate. It's also encouraged that parents do not glorify their own experiences if they had it. So when you say to your children, boy, when I was your age, we used to chug it down, or, those kind of things are not encouraged, because what you do is you glorify and you make them actually want to be able to engage in it.
Yes.
What we know also is that from studies that have been conducted, children who grow up in home environments where drug use is normalized, the likelihood that they will use is way higher than those who are not exposed to it. So we encourage parents, you have to deal with your own drug use issues if you have them, So talk to them, be open and honest, but also try to curtail your drug use if you have a problem as a parent.
And with that, I want to just switch a little way from the kids to adults, okay? So let's say I'm an adult sitting out there, I'm online, I'm not sure whether I have a substance abuse problem or not. Let's talk about alcohol. Let's say, as I said, I think I'm a social drinker. I drink occasionally. I don't think there's a problem. But maybe persons around me may think that there's a problem. How, sitting at home online now watching this program, how do I assess myself and know whether this is problematic or not?
You want to go and do the cage questionnaire? I mean, if you realize you have to cut down, if you're drinking early in the morning, if you get irritated when people speak to you about your drinking, which one am I leaving out? So if you realize you're meeting all of those criteria, you know something is really, really happening here. I need to get myself checked. And if you're not certain, you have health centers all around, the nearest health center. The doctors are being trained in doing these brief interviews, these brief screening tools, using these tools to determine if you need this kind of intervention and where to direct it to the NC, the nearest counselors. There are psychiatric, mental health, community mental health services there. We're there to help you.
Daniel, like
the one point I'm saying is in order for me to feel well, I have to take a little drink, something is wrong. All right, that's as simple. If my head, if I'm not well, if I don't feel well, the only one can calm me down, I have to take a little tips or something internally is wrong. So we need to talk about that.
So you'll hear people say things like, gosh, I need a drink, or I need a spliff, or if you need to feel better, then that's a red flag. And children are exposed to these things rather than hearing somebody say, I need to take a walk, or let me go take a run, or let me call somebody and talk about how I feel so that I can feel better. When you go to a substance to feel better, there's a problem.
So understand, one of the first where children learn about life is through us. So if we can manage our stress, or if we can cope with our problems, we're teaching them how to deal with it by just watching ourselves.
Now, one of the things that we mentioned earlier, I just want to bring it up again, because maybe I don't have any substance abuse problems, but I may look down on someone else who is an alcoholic or who abuses another drug and say, this person really has no self-control, that kind of stuff. Is that really the case, or is something organically changed in this person's brain that is making them have that tendency to crave or self-medicate on things like alcohol, marijuana, and those kinds of drugs? What is the situation?
If I'm getting the question right, is it that they're depressed and they're using alcohol to cope? Or is it that you're asking while using alcohol, the alcohol becomes a metabolite, which the body starts to use as an energy source? The alcohol you become even tolerant to the normal doses. So if you're used to drinking a cup, no, the cup doesn't have the same effect. That's referring to tolerance. So you need more than a cup. You need to drink a whole bottle to have the same effect, and so you become more tolerant. So certainly by that time, you're having a serious problem.
I think generally as well, family members and close friends, and just the general population, there is stigma and discrimination associated with problematic use and addiction. So we hear the names like, oh, is it a cokehead boy, or him is an alcoholic, or, those kind of negative labels that we put on people who have problematic use. And there is a lack of understanding about the fact that, it is a brain disease. Addiction is a brain disease. And it is something that has to be handled very carefully. Now, we have to understand also that some of the people who are dependent on substances have done some terrible things in their families. They have stolen from them. They have, been physically abusive, verbally abusive. But beyond those behaviors is somebody who is struggling with a disease. And the more we can understand that and even seek help for ourselves as family members. Sometimes there is need for support, not only for the person who uses, but also for the people who live with them, to be able to understand how to cope, how to manage, how to exercise, tough love. What is the difference between tough love and becoming abusive yourself? It's a complicated scenario.
Right.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Did you ask if one particular drug is looked down on versus the other particular drug?
Not necessarily, but just abuse in general. Substance abuse is looked down upon.
It's like some man says, sir, when I use drug and I'm going to smoke herb. So some drugs are persons classify ganja is not a drug versus cocaine. So some people do look at it like that as well.
Is this a correct view? Is ganja a drug?
Yes, it is. It is a drug, but it's just you have to also take into consideration some cultural norms. But some persons will use the boy, ganja is not a drug. Versus we know what it does to the person. So it's just having a conversation with them and pointing out them and teaching them. But some persons just lack of knowledge.
Okay, so let's talk about ganja then. What are some persons may compare one drug to another, as you said. They may say ganja is, has nowhere near the side effects of, say, a cocaine or a crack or something like that, okay? But let's talk about marijuana per se. Craig, tell us about some of the negative impacts of marijuana on persons.
Well, we see that every day in our clinics, where it exacerbates, because it has psychoactive properties. So it's common to hallucinate.
What does that mean, hallucinate?
When you're
That's a big word.
seeing things that aren't there, or smelling things, tasting things, even feeling things that aren't there. That's an hallucination. You're picking up you're perceiving something that's not real. And these psychoactive substances can make you hallucinate. And certainly, in my experience, lots of our patients in our mental health clinics are using these substances, and it's aggravating some of their chronic psychotic problems. So they're presenting for schizophrenia, for example, and they're using the substance, but it only makes their schizophrenia worse. Or in the case of a young person, it may manifest the problem earlier in their presentation. So whereas they may not have had a psychotic episode in their lifetime, smoking the cannabis might manifest the genetic tendency to have this symptom.
Also, there's another thing. All right. You realize there's a lot of, what do I call it now, ganja shops are all over the place nowadays. Herb houses are popping up all over the place. Dispensaries, a whole heap of names, right? No, ganja, I'm just speaking from my point, has changed over the years. It's like ganja back in the 80s is different from ganja today. When you have persons who are now tweaking it, so you have more THC, which is alternate. So in that way, that's I think some studies what makes it worse. Because you have all sorts of different strains. I think Jamaica has about 12, used to have about 12 or 13 natural strains. But now with persons going in a lab and tweaking it, we're realizing that boy is having a total different effect.
Is it becoming more addictive?
The THC content is higher. So it has a higher likelihood of having a greater impact on mental health and mental health issues. One of the other things about ganja that a lot of people don't know is that whereas for some drugs, it's either a stimulant where it speeds up the central nervous system, or like cocaine, or a depressant like alcohol where it slows down the central nervous system. With ganja, it can do different things to different people. So if somebody smokes a spliff and somebody beside them smokes it, for this person A, it could be stimulating their central nervous system. For person B, it could cause hallucinations. They could be seeing things and hearing. For person C, it could just totally depress their. So it doesn't have one effect on everybody. And therein lies the danger, because you don't know until you use it.
But there must be some good effects of ganja, aren't there? Because we hear about medical marijuana and that kind of stuff. So how do we throw that into the mix of substance abuse and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, we know that there are lots of chemicals inside of ganja. And the main two, Daniel spoke of one, the THC. They also have CBD. So in the dispensaries, they're selling the CBD primarily, because we know that. But there are mixtures. The studies have shown that they actually benefit from a mixture rather than the pure preparations. And in fact, sometimes I have to prescribe CBD oils for persons who are very addicted to cannabis. They're smoking 10 spliffs a day. I have to say, hey, smoking is not good for you. Nothing smoked is good for you, right? So I might prescribe CBD oils to try and get them to wean them off of it. So CBD, it's useful for, many studies have been done helpful for many pain syndromes, anxiety. So, I mean, there's a long list. If you go online, there's a long list of things. People wonder, how is it that these things treat almost this long list? You know? So sometimes you have to wonder, is it the pharmaceutical industry trying to make profit off the drug? Or where is the line drawn between the safe use and harmful use?
I would also like to add that we cannot ignore the fact that it is medicinal, right? And so when we come out and say, you know, ganja is terrible, ganja is bad, ganja will mad you, ganja, people know that that is not entirely true. And so NCDA had to actually pull back and reassess our messaging about ganja. So we came out with a campaign 2 years ago called Good Ganja Sense. Now it might sound weird that the National Council on Drug Abuse is talking about good ganja sense, but what is good ganja sense? It is being able to understand that the plant has medicinal properties. It don't mean that when you smoke it, you get the medicine. It means that you can extract certain components and you know, the CBD, and people use it for glaucoma, for asthma, for all sorts of, there are medicines that have been seizures, for multiple sclerosis, for a number of medical conditions.
HIV-related anorexia.
But, but you have to balance that with the fact that we need to keep young people away from it because it can impact the development of the brain. You have to balance that with the fact that people who have a predisposition to mental illness or women who are pregnant must stay away from it, you know? We have to also face the fact that we have a Rastafarian community that uses it as
a sacrament.
A sacrament. And what we're going to do is tell them to change their religion? No, but we have to provide messaging that is balanced. And that's what we try to do.
Fair, fair, fair. Any other comments on this?
Just to add, nothing smoked is healthy.
That's great.
So I can't self-medicate by smoking ganja. You wouldn't recommend that?
Wouldn't recommend smoking anything.
So basically what we're saying is that the drug or the substance ganja has several substances within it. Some of those are useful medically, some are not. Some cause you to form habits, some are responsible for that feeling that you get. And by smoking, you're not sure what's going to happen, are you?
Sure.
When you smoke, you actually destroy a majority of the benefits of it. So I think that's what we're saying. I'm from St. Ann. So back in St. Ann, you used to have this bottle of rum and ganja inside of it is extract. And person used to use it and sap it on you in order to deal with pain. So there is some benefit to it. History, Jamaica back in the day used to lead when it comes to research in ganja. And so there's a lot of benefits, but we also have a lot of negative. So as Mrs. Atkinson mentioned, it is us having a conversation because our youths now can just go online and research on their own. So somebody has to guide them with what they're learning. Yeah.
One of the things that we've seen also, sorry, from our treatment data, 50% of the people who are in treatment for problematic use are there because of ganja. So while we're saying, you know, while the perception is that it's not so harmful and so on, for some people, it is very harmful. And if 50% of all of the treatment centers are seeing people, 50% of the people who are in there are there for ganja use, it speaks to the fact that it is harmful for some.
Okay. Now, I just want to refer to some of the comments online. We have Son of God who says, it seems we are in a perpetual state of reactive solutions. What are the real preventative measures? What is done to hold accountable the sellers, the parents, etc.? Son of God also says, since use of substances is so widespread outside of addiction, are there data to suggest the other actual dangers long-term to these individuals? Outside of addiction, what are some, I think we kind of answered this in terms of some of the long-term effects of using some of these substances. Do you want to reiterate some of these points? Greg, you want to go ahead with that? outside of addiction, what are some of the long-term effects of substance use or substance abuse?
Right. What was mentioned, these things already. You have occupational hazards. You know, it minimizes your potential. Certainly, but with my experience, we've seen many children fall off in their grades, fall off in the potential that we see that they could have achieved. We've seen people who may not pull their weight at work. Their performance, they become irritable, especially if they're away from the substance. Just last week, I saw a gentleman who was well respected by his company, but because he's smoking, he's becoming irritable. It's difficult to work without work, and so they have to be carrying him for various evaluations to get him assessed to see how can they help him, because he's a hard worker. Why is he not performing? Why is he not getting along well? But this substance, definitely, this is this main substance that he's using. Is responsible for this behavior.
The association with non-communicable diseases is also very important. So alcohol use and tobacco use are both, there are 2 of 4 things that are highly associated with non-communicable diseases later on in life. So you're talking about things like cancer, you know, cardiovascular disease. I mean, you can speak about it better than I can. But the fact is, right, addiction leads to these things later on. So cancers in all parts of the body, particularly with cigarette smoking. And so, yeah, it's not well understood when you're starting out or while you're in the throes of addiction, but later on in life, we see people with all sorts of problems, with cardiovascular problems, with NCDs, all of it.
Infectious diseases.
Infectious diseases. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, those are some of the long-term impacts.
And then when they come at that point in time, they would say, if I had known this then.
I saw a gentleman during the week, at a funeral, somebody who I went to school with. So he's just 50 a little bit. And he was showing me a list of 17 medications that he's currently on.
17?
17. Because he's unable to kick the habit of cigarette smoking. He said he came to us and for 2 years, and he's just not been able, because nicotine is one of the most addictive substances, you know. In some cases, more addictive than heroin and cocaine for some people. And so, you know, he's now seeing the result of that with these 17 medicines that he has to take.
Wow. Okay, so let's do we have any questions in-house, in the sanctuary? If you do have a question, I think we'll get a roving mic, and you can just come forward and ask your questions. Let's move away from substance abuse now, and let's go on to something which is not spoken about much. But it's probably more prevalent than we do know. Let's talk about pornography. I see Daniel smile.
We both.
Ms. Atkinson, do we have any data as to the prevalence of addiction to pornography?
So NCDA deals with substances, but I can tell you from the rapid situation assessment that we did last year among the students, inappropriate use of social media, particularly viewing pornography, was one of the major things that came out, both from students and from guidance counselors. And so we know it exists, but I can't tell you about the prevalence. I don't know. But our young people are watching it. They're using the tablets. They're using, you know, the social media, their phones. And it is becoming a problem because they're seeing these behaviors being replicated, manifested, you know, increasing within the school context.
Daniel, it looked like you're ready to jump in.
Well, I had actually had an incident this week where algorithms, when it comes to Instagram or social media, where you're watching certain reels, at the end of the reel, something porn comes on for about 5 seconds and then instantly disappear, right? So you have to be careful what your children are watching. So once the brain starts to see this and then it continues, then that develops into an addiction, right? But if you watch music videos nowadays, majority of it where it's highly sexualized. So we have a problem and it's a serious problem that we need to have conversations about, because we do have plenty of adults who are hiding to watch these different things.
I think the way the industry is set up, they just want a foothold or a toehold. Okay, just one inappropriate search online, and you go on a website, and you come off the website and you see things popping up again, and things asking you to register and to that kind of stuff. And once you get hooked, you're hooked, aren't you?
You're hooked. Because it's like this. The danger is when it goes into the subconscious. So if you continue to see something on a conscious level over a period of time, that goes, it's like you're using a laptop. The desktop is where you have the storage, but the majority of storage is in the CPU. So if you continue to watch these videos, you download it, it goes into the subconscious, that becomes a serious problem over a period of time. It's like I normally talk about the three monkeys. The one that has the hand over the ears, over the eyes, and over the mouth. We have to be careful, especially for our children, what they hear, what they see, and what they speak. So we do have some problems, or we need to have some more conversations about.
Craig, do you see persons coming into you with issues with pornography, addiction? Is that something that persons present for help with?
No, I'm not seeing that directly. What I'm seeing is more of the persons who may be disinhibited. So they're using substances, or they have other comorbid mental illnesses, which because of that particular illness, they may be engaged in that kind of activity. So I'm not seeing too much of that on my side, where mental health illnesses are treated. But I know that it exists. And it's a problem.
Okay. Can one be addicted to sex?
All right, you remember earlier when I talked about the two different types of addiction, behavioral addiction and substance addiction? Persons, correct me if I'm wrong, there is certain criteria for a person must meet before reach addiction state. If I have not met somebody who's addicted to sex itself, but I've studied when it comes to different documentaries, like a person who will have multiple partners, no matter how much time they have sex, they just want more. So they will sleep with everybody, and it still does not satisfy that need, right? So I think that's one of the best ways I could answer that one.
I've seen two cases, but it's challenging, It's not an easy thing to get over. And the colleague came to me and said, listen, he has this problem, and he has been struggling with it. His wife doesn't know. And he's been fighting it, and he gets anxious when he's presented with anxiety. And then when he got to the crux of the anxiety, it's because he was struggling with this addiction with sex. So it's something that you have to meet with him regularly, speak to him about it, treat the anxiety, and with time, after discussing with him and spending some time, he said he had gotten help. He had more control over his urges.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. What about our children are using more devices, their phones, their laptops, the video games. When does use of our electronic devices approach addiction? Can you be addicted to video games and devices? How do I know that I'm bordering on addiction, or I do have an addiction to this electronic device here? Everybody looks at Craig.
I mean, maybe we can compare it to like when you get up in the morning and the first thing you have to do is go on your device, or you find yourself hours and hours
Screen time is increasing.
I want to give you an example of something I saw 2 weeks ago. I was on an 8.5-hour flight from Miami to Portugal, and right beside me was a lady with her 2-year-old baby. 7 hours out of the 8.5-hour flight, the baby was on the tablet, on the cell phone, on the screen in front of she was on the screen the entire time. Now, this is something that we're noticing. Parents are using devices to soothe children from very early. The earlier you expose children to screen time, the worse it is. I mean, their behavioral patterns are impacted. Their sleep time is, that child didn't sleep until 7 hours into the flight, you know. And I watched it and I was appalled because at 2 years old, there's no way you should be on the screen for 7 hours. So this is an encouragement, and you know, we don't really understand the impact it is having, but we see these children. In fact, yesterday I spoke to a pediatrician who told me that there is a new diagnosis for autism that is virtual, it's associated with screen time. It's reversible, but it is showing that the longer our young people and our children are on screens, the more it can impact their behavioral patterns, their brain development, and ultimately, you know, their outcomes.
Rewires the brain, right? So we're just going to go to that. I think I read a research, something recently, what says you should not introduce your child to any form of device until about 12 or 13, right?
12 or 13 months?
Years old. It's like years old. It's like persons who drink energy drinks. And most of the energy drinks bottle, it says not before age 12, right? But we see a lot of children walking around drinking them. So another way to look at it is that our children are learning about life through the device, what they watch. So you realize they're acting and talking like the different shows and things what they watch. So they are, in some ways, I would use the word pre-programming, based on the different shows. So I do know some countries have serious problem now when it comes to devices, especially social media addiction. Because I have students who I interact with on a regular basis. Sir, I can't function without my phone. If you take my phone from me, it's like I want to kill myself. So we have a serious problem now with social media, because it does rewire the brain, similar to how different drugs rewire the brain.
But how do we find the balance, though? Because you indicated a bit of advice in terms of not introducing these devices before age 12 or 13. But we realize that a lot of our children also use these devices as learning implements. The other day when we had COVID and persons were at home, everybody had to be on a device because this is how the classes were being introduced to the children. So how do we strike a balance in our children or in ourselves as adults in terms of how much time we spend on these devices and how much time we spend doing other things like talking to people face to face and being out there in the outdoors? How do we strike that balance? Am I asking the hard questions?
From personal experience. I have 3 children. They all have iPads, right?
Yes.
So I have to set screen time. So, or days where they cannot use their devices. And I found that before COVID, they were doing well. When they had COVID and they had to be on it without the restrictions, notice that they were struggling. I mean, is it that they were away from school, from face to face? When we restricted them, no iPad days and finite time when restricted time, we saw that their grades went back up. So from my personal experience, there's validity to the need for regulating the use of the tablet and the devices. Even the programs that they're watching, you know, you have YouTube and you have child YouTube, but we've just deleted YouTube completely from it. so from the iPad. So they're doing Google Classroom and doing their assignments online. They can play some games, but there's finite restricted time. You have to be really vigilant at what they're using.
I see someone asking, can we really keep children away from their devices, regulate them until they're 12 years old? I think we kind of explored that. And we have to realize that our children are extremely smart. You set limits on the device. They find the password, they change it and change it back. Our children are extremely smart. We have to try to, it's difficult to outsmart them where these electronic devices are, because they are introduced to them earlier in life. They know everything about it. Sometimes you may have a problem with your phone and you give it to your child and say, fix this for me, and 2 tools, they give it back to you and say, it's done.
So here's another thing. Sorry, Dee. Another thing would be to, we're not saying take them away from them, but ensure that at some point during the weekend, at some point during the afternoons, the children go outside, or they play games with the family, or they sit and talk. So you're not saying, no, you know, entirely remove it, but balance is important.
One of the things that we do in our home is that when we have dinner together, we say that dinner is a no device time. Everybody carries their phone to the table, you know, because it's like attached to their hip. But once we say that grace and we start eating, it's a no device time. This is face-to-face talking time. And sometimes they don't talk, but at least they're not on their devices doing, you know, other things.
All right, just a quick point. Be careful how you use a device. Like, for example, I do know persons who sleep with their device under their pillow. Persons who have the device in their pocket, right? I don't think that is healthy for us, so we have to understand those different things. Just a touch, I think, right, like don't have it close to your breast, don't have it close to your radiation. It's a reality. This device now there's radiation in it, so it does harm. So we have to be, mindful of that. Remember that our children are developing, you know. So when you introduce these different things, it affects how the body develops. On a side note, my son is 8 years old, and yesterday I locked him out of my laptop by putting my fingerprint on it. This young man went in it and changed it and put on a pin for me to go in my own laptop, right? So they are smart. So, I didn't hear that. So they are, I laugh, I said, when I was his age, I was fool. This generation different. The reality is we can't stop. We have now gone into this digital era. We're talking about AI right now, where the reality shows that in the next couple of years, majority of the jobs that we're presently doing today will go extinct, right? So ChatGPT, our children now know how to go on this device, and within 1 minute, it can write an entire schoolwork for you. Our children are learning these things. Right? My daughter said that is Facebook of old people. Right? So we have to have that conversation between the two different generations, but we have to continue to guide them until they reach a place where they're mentally ready to take over life. So these things are slowing down our children, because if you continue to depend on AI too much, you're going to step aside and use it. It's like you're not using it, it is using you. But anyway.
One other thing I want to say, when we did the assessment last year, guidance counselors were very concerned about the fact that our children are no longer able to pay attention. They were inattentive, they were hyperactive. It was just like they couldn't settle. And part of that is extreme or excessive screen time. It causes that effect, you know? And so it causes that effect. It causes that behavior. And so across the board, we're seeing where in classrooms, our children are they're not able to just sit down, talk. I was in a focus group the other day. The young people with whom I was speaking, they were just, I mean, you know,
it's adults as well, though.
Yes. Adults as well. Yes. And so, you're right. So it's not just about the children, but we're particularly concerned about the children because they're at the level where their brains are still developing. We've done 25, your brain is already developed, right? But while a toddler or an infant, I see people giving 2-month-old babies cell phones. It's not a good thing, and we need to be aware that it's not a good thing.
All right, just to touch on what Mrs. Atkinson mentioned, is understand the attention span. If you go to a reel range from anywhere between 15 seconds to 90 minutes, to 90 seconds, right? The average person watch a reel for 10 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds. So they're just moving from one reel to the next reel to the next reel, and that goes on for hours, right? So there's these conversations what we need to continue to have.
I realize,
and just to put, when it comes to algorithm, your phone knows you better than you. Because we're discussing something today and go home and look on your timeline and realize that most of the things you discuss actually come up in the timeline itself. So it's always learning.
Okay, turning to our audience, our congregation in Sanctuary. You have been very quiet. Do we have any questions from the congregation? Or comments, questions or comments? Dario? There's a mic back there.
So what I want to know is, lots of people who are listening to the program already have kids who have been on their phones and who have been using their phones and been exposed to this. So is it too late? How do parents who are listening to the program now, who have kids say, boy, I already met my child exposed to this thing, tablets and phone all the time, have been doing this from baby stage or whatever it is, or from, as Yuki said, from 2 months old. What can be done now?
What happens now?
All right.
Children are resilient. So
Bounce back.
yeah, they will bounce back if you engage them. So, and as Oki said, their brains are still maturing. There's a lot of residual capacity.
So it's never too late, right? So all right. So a lot of people will say, but I'm learning a whole lot of things with the tablet. She can sing this, or she know orange, she know red, she know apple, she know pineapple. All right. A 2-year-old may be able to sing and say all these things, but do they know how an apple feels? Do they know what it looks like outside? The part of the brain that needs stimulation, the tablet is only reaching one part of the brain, right? So when they get to explore their environment, they go outside, you give them a pot with some little things in there and they're able to feel it and understand and learn. That is how infants learn. So they need to get the practical. All right, we're not saying take away the tablet entirely. For teenagers, we would say you need to sit down and talk to your child. This thing about them coming home and they're gone in the room and they're in the room for the entire time and you don't know what they're watching, you don't know what they're doing, you don't know who they're talking to. How do you get them out? You try to sit and spend time, quality time. Not just that you sit down and both of you are watching another screen, right? But that you're talking to them, how was your day? What happened today? What are you concerned about? Do you have anything you want to tell me? You have to build a relationship. The studies that we have done have shown that parents who have meals with their children, who know who their children's friends are, who know where their children are, all of those things, the closeness is what is called a protective factor for drug use. So children whose parents do those things with them are way less likely to end up experimenting and then moving on to problematic use than those children whose parents don't really know nothing about them. So it is important for us to build relationships from very early and maintain them through adolescence.
Now, there's a big area that we haven't really spoken about. I know it's a major problem in the United States, and that's addiction to prescription drugs. And why that came to mind was a question by Karen Nugent, who says, how about patients with long-term health conditions who, for example, who are addicted to drugs, example, sicklers and narcotics. As you know, sicklers tend to have, or persons with sickle cell disease, sickle cell anemia, they'll have painful crises. They'll have horrible pains in their bones, and the regular pain medication, the Panadol, the ibuprofen, not gonna touch it. And so a lot of them use strong medication, morphine and codeine and that kind of stuff. So let's address the question of addiction to prescription drugs. Anybody wants to take this one on?
I can start with the prevalence. When we do our national surveys, we do include questions about, use of prescription medication without a prescription for it. What we found, though, is that the prevalence of that is quite low. But I think if we looked...
That's in our population.
Among our population, 12 to 65. We're doing another survey right now, as I said. What the data has shown is that it's about 2 to 3% of the population reported doing this in 2016. We expect post-COVID, we may see an increase in that. But I have to say that if we go to the particular groups like ticklers or...
Doctors?
You say it. You say it. Or others, right? Then we may see a higher prevalence. And so it may not be that you might not pick it up in a general population survey. You're more likely to pick it up in specific target groups, which we have not assessed.
Let me ask you a question, though. Usually say that, anything that happens in the United States is just a matter of time before it filters down to the Caribbean and Jamaica. Do we see, is this a looming problem that is probably coming to our shores anytime soon?
The opioid crisis,
yes.
That kind of thing. All right, so we're very concerned that it's only a matter of time before we may see that among our population. Daniel, you look like
no, needle phobia is an issue here. So the medications that have to be injected, our population tends to be afraid of needles. So that would be, as we said, a protective factor. Nonetheless, it's still a powerful drug, and it is very addictive. So I suspect it will still make its way here. So public health, public policy needs to be preparing for this wave.
Right. So there's, I know there is some. When the United States needs Jamaica catch a cold, right? So there are certain substances that are used now over there, which we're not necessarily seeing in Jamaica yet, like fentanyl. So we are having a conversation because we are preventative. That means that we're going to start talk about it from now. We're not going to just wait until it comes, because eventually persons are, especially when it comes to dealers, the object of a dealer is to make money. So fentanyl, if you need to go on YouTube and look up what is going on now in Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and all of these different countries.
Zombie drugs.
The zombie drug. There is a serious epidemic right now. What is going on in the United States when it comes to prescription drugs or opioid and these? I guess you can explain this, the feel. Is where I was going to get up and show it, but no, I mean persons like stay like this for hours, can't move. And back in the day when even Molly, when they used, I think it was bath salt, methamphetamine, about 4 different substances were combined. You had persons were used to, I remember one case where this gentleman ate off the man's ear and bite off the man's face. So we have the extremes we're talking about here. The problem, though, is that I was in the United States recently. I think we eat too much medication sometimes, where we're prescribing Xanax and certain things for dogs, because dogs now have anxiety issues. But I guess I'll leave that one alone.
I wanted to also mention, one of the reasons why we're very concerned is that, you see, what we see is that our young people are now more likely to be pill popping. So the increased popularity of Molly, what can happen is that very often when people are using Molly, they think it's MDMA in it. But what dealers do is they cut it and mix it with a range of other things. What they've found in some South American countries is that fentanyl is in some of those MDMA pills. And so it can easily slip under the radar. And if that happens for us, we're in serious problems. So what we have been advocating for is that our Dangerous Drugs Act needs to be amended to include some of these substances so that they can be appropriately regulated, as well as if people are found with them, they can feel the full brunt of the law. Right now it is under the Chemical Precursors Act or the Pharmacy Act. There was a gentleman who came to us the other day from, what you call the dog the K9 division. And he said he was at the airport and there was a gentleman who came into the island with a suitcase filled with colorful pills. And he was sure that they were not vitamins, as the young man was saying they were. But there was nothing for us to be able to seize those drugs and to, chemically test them and all of that. And so what we suspect is that a whole bunch of MDMA, ecstasy pills or whatever, came into the island without any, any sort of system in place to screen them and confiscate them.
You see, the drug using population has changed, especially when it comes to, I think we are going to have a problem soon when it comes to different persons using different substances, whether you have, Jamaicans are afraid of needles, right? But then you have somebody who goes to a particular country, learn a particular culture, and then brings that back and mix with the population itself and changes it, right? So I've met persons who actually inject. So it depends on the persons and the different situation. What I'm saying to parents is this. Back in the day, some parents used to hide and smoke chocho leaf or banana leaf or paper. Right? Reality. And reality we're talking about. So now make it be practical. What we do to help our children, because the dynamics has changed. And they may be introducing to something what does much damage faster than, well, I don't know what banana leaf does to the body. But I just know these designer drugs, our children are watching them on TikTok. You have TikTok challenge. Right? So we need to start have the conversation about to our children about what they see. I know everything if we run down or follow behind. So we need to be practical with our approach. Their generation is different from your generation. So we have to find the balance now. How do you merge the two generations? Because majority of the children that I speak to is this. My mother and my father don't listen to me. I can't express myself. Right. We go back to the day where a child is supposed to be seen and not heard, not realizing that this generation, because we're now in the alpha generation, they are different. So now we have to understand that the things of old not necessarily going to work with these set right here. So we have to educate ourselves, because what I understand is this, is that we as parents have lack of knowledge and information. I can come in here now with one of those vape pens and none of you will know. Exactly. Because back in the day you used to have Gen 1, now we're at Generation 5, right? And you also have to use the language what they know.
Daria?
Yes, so some people ask a question. So I get one thing here now. Children are to be seen and not heard. The kids don't mind that. Because if they are not being heard and they are just being seen, they sit down quiet on their device and they are engaged with other people who are hearing them. But they are not hearing them from the voice. They are hearing them from what they are writing. So they are being heard by other people. So they are to be seen and not heard, and they don't mind being seen and not heard. But we need to hear our kids.
Can I say, though?
Yes.
That's not what they say. The adolescents, no. The focus groups we did.
Yes.
And I mean, it's not just the focus groups, but young people generally are saying that they do not get an opportunity to air their feelings because nobody's listening to them.
Okay.
And when they do, it is as though, you don't even know how to, you're not putting food on the table. What are you talking about? You're stressed out. You're not supposed to be stressed. Oh, so we're not taking the time to listen. We're not giving them an opportunity to share. Mm-hmm. And that is what they say. So they're not happy to be seen and not heard.
So we are thinking that kids should not be stressed. When they say they are stressed, we need to take them seriously.
Precisely.
So try to find out what is stressing them.
Exactly.
And not say that because they're not working and getting food for the table that they cannot ever be stressed.
Exactly.
So we should listen to them. Points taken. I have two questions that came online to me. Who are about the suppliers for these things that the students are using? Do we know anything about the suppliers for these drugs that the students are getting from school or wherever? Is there a penalty to the suppliers? Can they be reported? To whom do they report? In terms of when we find out about who is supplying these drugs or whatever, can we report it? To whom do they report? What is the role of the government in discouraging this? Is it just students getting Molly and Polly and whatever from school or from wherever? Is there any system in place? What is being done to try? Because when parents send their children to school, the parents are not there.
The problem is multifaceted. So some students say that it's their parents that give them it to sell. Some people say it's them big cousin that give it to them to carry to school and share. Some people get it from students themselves. We do have laws in place. We have the Child Protection Act. We have the Alcohol Spirit License Act. We have all of these laws that are on paper and are not necessarily being enforced. So the enforcement component is where we fall down. So it's great. We have the tobacco regulations coming where, you know, smoking in public spaces and selling to children and all of that is supposed to be prohibited. But if people are not being punished, then why not do it? And if you don't recognize that doing this to children is impacting their health and their outcomes later on, and for you as the supplier, earning money is more important to you than anything else, if we don't help people to understand, then they're going to continue.
Let me just give you another point here. The reality is this. Within 5 minutes of any location I'm at, I can buy almost any substance. That is the reality. Within 5 minutes of this location, anywhere I go, I can buy substances. It's easily accessible. Remember I told you earlier, we don't have to go looking for substance now. All I have to do is take out my device, go on Instagram or one of these pages and order it, and a bearer comes and delivers it at my house.
Yeah, they say it's like a pizza. You can just like order a pizza now, it comes straight to you.
And times and situations have changed, you know. But the problem is we need to change and understand what is going on. Because there's things going on under our roof what we're not aware of. Because when a person let me use vaping, for example. When they vape inside the house, you're going to smell it like a cigarette you're smelling, you know. It's different. So we need now to understand what is going on. That's why the conversation between our children must be a two-way, not a one-way one-way thing, because there's a lot going on in our children's life. If we're not careful, we're going to lose a generation. So we have to be practical and start talk about different things. I hope at one point we start having a conversation about trauma. How did trauma affect us in the past, but it's still affecting us presently? So most of the time, we can't talk to our children because we are hurting. So because we are hurting now, we don't know what it means to give to our child the attention what we never got, because we never learn it. So make a change the narrative.
All right, so just to have a balanced discussion as the ministry rep here, that the mental health unit and the Ministry of Health have been working with the Ministry of Education to do work with the schools and do more health promotional activities in the schools. So you'll see the minister doing more work, doing more interventions, promoting more health and wellness issues. And I think because policy takes a little while to change, and we need a change in policy, as you speak of, where this is what's happening on the ground now. So he's doing the work.
But is there anything that can be done? You know, Daniel, you spoke about the easy availability of drugs. You can order it like a pizza. Does our government have the resources to track down these internet sources and shut them down? Or as quickly as you shut them down, 10 more will open up? How are we addressing that? Anybody has any idea where that's concerned?
It's outside of my understanding.
Oh, there's a question from the audience. Just identify yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening, happy Sabbath, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Jason Campbell. It's not really a question, but a comment based on everything that I've overheard so far. So I believe that we often forget that the devil is not playing. That the devil is not playing. Not playing. He's short on time. and he's working hard to reduce his sentence. Because for every sin that we ask for forgiveness, and when we make it in the kingdom, he's going to have to pay for it. But for everyone that is lost, they have to pay for their own sins. So he does everything to ensure to let his punishment be less. Now, as a people, I believe, one, we are very selfish. We are only concerned about our own affairs until when things happen in our circle so bad that it shakes, that it shakes us. So we are selfish. We are not proactive because we wait until things get out of hand. So I have to commend this as well, because I see this as being proactive in the situation. 3, we, for a great extent, are all children. And you might say, why did I say that? You mentioned about trauma. At the point of our trauma, if we don't deal with it, we do not grow beyond it. So we'll age and surpass the calendar. We will go into a profession, have a good job, have families, but you're still 12 years old mentally. Because that thing happened to you at 12, and there was nobody for you to talk to, because guess what? Children were to be seen and not heard. And you live with that. When you become an adult, you can't talk to anyone anymore, so you can't relate to your children, you can't relate to your parents, you can't relate to your friends, and you are in a room full of people, but you're entirely alone, still trying to live life. 4, we are controlled. We do not have freedom as much as we think. Devices, drugs, the television programs. And this ties into the next one. The government doesn't care about us as much as we think. Because we're all selfish. I believe, like, you remember, I think it was last year, there was this man that came out and cussed out our Prime Minister. And I don't think it took him 2 days to find him. No, if you can take 2 days to find that individual, I know it doesn't work out exactly that way, but I don't think it should take that long for you to track down the criminals in our country, for you to stamp down on the crack operations and the gun trafficking. Why are there so many guns coming through our wharfs? We are Seventh-day Adventists. We believe that this world is coming to an end. We believe that the Sunday law is coming and all these things. And you can see it in the policies of America with the LGBT, how it has come out to Jamaica. I was coming down earlier.
It's all coming. It's all coming.
Just swearing. This world is crumbling. And we have to take the personal accountability that nobody's going to save our families. Nobody's going to save our children. So as parents and those in church and so forth, sometimes you might have to be the parent to another child because the adult is incapable of doing it. The Bible says, train up your child in the way he should go, and when he's old,
he won't depart from it.
He won't depart from it. If we equip our children with the word and with the social skills and with the the different skills to deal with problems and stresses and so forth and things, and for them to put their trust in God and still do what they can. Yes, some may fall through the cracks, but I believe a great number of them will be equipped to bring the gospel and to ultimately save as many persons on this planet as possible.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you very much. And I like the spiritual component that we brought, the gentleman brought to this conversation. In terms of everything, because if you think about the drug situation and the designer drugs that are being created almost by the minute or in the hour, things that are being more and more addictive, there are persons there outside who their job is to create addictive drugs to make persons addicted to them, okay? There are persons, that's their profession. That's what they do as their 9 to 5. They are creating drugs for our children to take. There are persons who their 9 to 5 is to create addictive games for our children to become addicted to. There are persons, their 9 to 5 is to create these reels that we will just sit on IG from morning, noon, and night, and that's all that we're doing. And anything to take our focus from God and spiritual things, that's the goal of the devil. That is what we're talking about here. Go ahead, Daniel.
There's a point, a very important point you made. What I want to. You made a few, some good points, but there's one I would like to touch. It's called adverse childhood experiences and how your past determines in many ways your present self. We are products of our past. So most persons, based on what you have been through, especially in your childhood, although you have aged, you are still stuck in the past. So these are some conversations where we have to start talking about healing of self so that we may help our children heal, right? Because the reality is this, is that many of us wear masks and we hide behind that mask. The thing about a mask is this, you wear it so long that you don't know where the mask ends and where you begin. So as you age, you realize that I feel fragmented. So some of our children, we're talking to them, I say, boy, sir, I don't feel real. The children will cry out. So we have anxiety and depression and all sorts of different things. The Ministry of Health is doing fabulous because I know there's a program now in school where they're providing psychologists to go in there and help children. And about self-harming, because guess what? When you have children at home, please check their body. Because majority of them are not majority, some of them are cutting themselves in order to release the pain. It's like a pressure cooker. Yes, if you check your life, how do you deal with the stress in your life? If you don't know to manage it, imagine our children. So we have a pressure cooker going on where they're going to explode if there's no vent in order to release that pressure. So they are literally cutting themselves. And these are what you can see on their hands, but most of them you need to check under their armpits or on their leg. So we have some problems what we need to have the conversation because most of them are trying to self-regulate their emotions because they're not, it's like I can't feel, it's like I don't know how to feel. You know?
I just want to underscore that point. The devil is out to steal souls. And if he allows us to destroy ourselves, our children to destroy themselves, he has achieved something. It came home to me a few months ago where I was part of a medical team covering this event over several days. And, there are lots of coughs and colds and that kind of stuff over the few days. But what struck me was that among this group of youngsters, church youngsters, there were 2 attempted suicides. And that just struck me. We're not talking about just a general population of young people. These children were exposed to church, the Adventist church. Our children have problems. Grave problems. And as parents, as as caregivers, as church members, brothers and sisters, we have to be very vigilant and take a stock of our children, because they have grave problems, they are self-medicating, they are self-harming, and we need to cauterize this problem before it's too late.
I just want to provide 2 examples of the same suicidal issues that we're having with our young people. So in 2017, when we did there's a survey we do called the Global School-Based Health Survey. That survey looks at physical activity, dietary behaviors, violence, suicidal ideation, drug use, a whole lot of things. At that time in 2017, 1 in 4 of our adolescents between the ages of 13 to 17, 1 in 4, reported that they had considered suicide.
1 in 4.
Yes, that was in 2017. Now, last year, when we did the qualitative, so it's not representative, while I was doing a focus group at a school in the West, after we finished the focus group, one of the young ladies said, all right, me know about, she said, this was so good, I get a chance to talk about how I feel, and so, I'm not going to kill myself again today. And I turned around and I looked at her and I said, what did you say? And all of the other young people said, Miss, every day she said she's going to kill herself. Every day. So when I spoke to the guidance counselor said, listen, after COVID, since they have come back, the quickest thing for them to talk about is that they're going to commit suicide. Now, one other example. We did the Global School-Based Health Survey between January to March in 23 St. Catherine high schools, 23. Remember, I tell you, it covers suicide as well. So we were in a classroom, a grade 7 classroom, and a young lady raised her hand, and I went to her, and she looked at me, and she pointed at the question that says, how many times have you attempted suicide in the past year? And she looked at me, and she said, suppose I can't count. And I said, maybe you don't understand what the question is asking. And she said, no, I cannot count how many times I tried to kill myself. When we went to the guidance counselor again to say, we couldn't identify the child, but we spoke about the fact that, these children are talking about suicide. She said, look here, the amount of them that every day they come to me, they show me that they're cutting themselves, they tell me that they're trying to kill themselves. We have a problem.
They're crying out for help.
They're crying out for help.
Craig, are you seeing this in your practice?
Yes, I am. I'm seeing it. There's just not enough formal help out there. So we have to be building capacity now. It is a real thing that speaking about. We're seeing a lot of cutting. A lot of it is related to personality disorder traits that are emerging. Some of them will become borderline personality disordered persons who are suffering from that condition. But the reality is we don't have enough therapists to manage the load, and we have to look at more preventative strategies to try and curb some of these things.
Before I come to the question, though, what is responsible for this epidemic?
Multifaceted. So the stress of being at home for 18 months, for some children, school is a safe haven. And the things they were exposed to at home, in their communities, some of them had to work, some of them were abused, some of them were ignored, some of them were neglected. There are a broad range of things. Not to mention that online school was not easy, even for the best of children. And so we're not only talking about those who went through difficult circumstances. Just generally, it was a rough period for everybody. And so I don't think that when students returned, what we were more focused on is, all right, we have to finish the curriculum. We have to get them, back on track and get them into their academics. And we did not take the time to focus on their emotions and their mental health.
We had quite a few students, not only our children, but adults, who are still trapped. Because we have to understand is this, we had a lot of persons who we lost even during COVID, and we never got a chance to go and say goodbye, right? So we have to have this conversation where we heal on a collective level. Because on a collective level, we all went through it together. So now what we're doing here, we don't have all the answers. But what we're doing now is talking about it. And talking about it is one of the solutions. We are putting it out there what says, let us heal from this. Listen, before I even start this conversation, I should have said, boy, this might even bring up in your own life some past memories, what we have repressed or suppressed, right? So we need to start talking about what is going on with us so that we may move from the past to learn how to live in the moment. Our problem is we don't know what it means to live in this moment. Most of us, the majority of the time, we spend our head. So we're always thinking about past events, or maybe are linked to depression. Looking towards the future, always maybe anxiety issues. Hardest thing is, so how do I live within this moment, the now? Once you feel safe enough, you start to live in this moment. The problem is we don't feel safe. Now, I think what we also have to understand is this. A lot of persons, we don't even understand what it means to connect to our body. Right? Because we not take care of this. This perfect thing what God gave us. We not take care of it because guess what? There is so much link between mental health and physical health. If the mind is not right, the body not good. If the body is not right, so we have to find a balance. So, we're trying to take it in stages. I know the ministry is doing the best what they can do, but when it comes to an entire nation and you only have a few persons, there is problem. So that is why we're looking, there is, you know what, yes.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead and ask your question or make your comment.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Kadian Jones. So a lot of what you guys have said, I would have had probably say experiences, not on a personal level, but during the course of my job, I would come across people who face with situations such as what you've been talking about. Madam has spoken about the fact that we have laws that are not being properly used or are pushed aside because nobody wants to take it on. What concerns me most is the fact that we have people who are, let me rephrase that. So we go back to the fact that we spoke about the devices and the amount of time that people spend on these devices. So when you have a child who locked away in the room and is on that device for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours or maybe all of the day, the parents would say that, oh, the child is in the room not giving any trouble because the child is on the device, not knowing what the child is being exposed to. So let me give you a practical example. There was an investigation that originated in South Africa. And you know, everywhere there's a Jamaican who always finds himself something that is exciting. So this excitement now happens to be child pornography. So this child, not a child, a young adult, 19 years old, locked away in his room, supposed to be going to upper 6, prominent high school, but on his 4 devices are child pornography amounting to about 30,000 videos and photographs. So how do you say that the child is, I don't even know how to express it, but how do you advise somebody who, say for example, the investigation now is here and the investigator now has to go through all of that information to traumatize himself? How do you encourage that person that, look, even though you're not per se consuming, right, this sort of behavior, how do you now encourage this person to look beyond what he or she has seen and to help this person to maybe find a better way of using his time or to get help in a certain way to deal with the situation that arose.
All right, so you're talking about secondary trauma.
Yeah.
So basically, like you're reliving the entire incidents all over again. So you yourself are experiencing, not necessarily you, I'm just talking about the person. You are reliving in everything. So it's like as caregivers, when we sit down and we listen to persons who share their trauma with us, that trauma becomes a part of our lives. So we have to have a proper filter system within our own self to allow it to filter through. Right? So I know we talk about self-care and how do you do self-care. That I would start to have the conversation. Like, do you have the person has a therapist or somebody where they can talk to, where can help them just deal with a process, what they have seen?
And before you go any further, the one thing I forgot to mention is that the person does not think that they have a problem.
Psychological first aid. You know, when there's a disaster or impending disaster, it sounds like a disaster has occurred. The basics is to look, listen, and link. So you listen to you look at, observe to see if there are any glaring issues that you can help with. You listen to the person to see where the problems are, if they're anxious, depressed, frightened. And then when you see these signs that they need help, then you pivot to linking them to care. If you're not the person providing the care, then you link them to the professional who's trained to provide that care without themselves being traumatized.
My second question would happen to do with the issue of a drug situation, wherein you're called to be the first responder in a situation where the child is proposing to do something either to himself or to the parents, or to cause some form of trouble or issue here, there, or everywhere. And you're called to be the first responder. What advice would you give to that person in going to deal with that situation?
Same principle, psychological first aid. So you mean you don't want to do any harm. Do no harm to the person you're trying to help, and obviously you're trying not to harm yourself when you're providing this help. And while doing that, use the same principle. You're going to look, observe, you're going to listen to carefully and attentively and carefully and empathetically, and then you link the person to, if you're the first responder, you should be trained to provide some basic psychological support, and if not, you are going to be linking them to the formally trained person. So you should know where the resources are in the community and link them to that appropriate resource.
Okay, turning to some questions online, one person said, I've observed a number of young men in my community who are seemingly mad after taking some substances. Can they recover from this?
The word mad is such a stigmatizing word. People use substances and they can become confused. They can become delirious. They can hallucinate. Remember, we use the term hallucinate. They can become even delusional. What is a delusion? Where you believe things that are not real and it's fixed and false. So some persons use these substances and pick up these symptoms, but it's all treatable. Sometimes this effect lasts for a finite time, sometimes a little longer, but usually we can treat it with the medications, with the different psychotherapeutic interventions that we have available. So it is manageable, especially if caught early. You don't want to leave these symptoms unchecked for very long, and this is why we need to be a connected society. We need to learn to self-care. We need to, of course, prevent these events from happening before they do, and know where the resources are to get appropriate help, right? So we cannot have these chronic and enduring illnesses destroy our lives and our potential.
Thank you, Craig. Angela says, as a parent, you have to be vigilant. You have to monitor your students' devices as it can be contagious. Parents have to get ahead of the student. They are tech savvy, but much radiation also harmful. Sometimes parents are challenged though. Sometimes parents didn't grow up in that technological age. So sometimes a parent can barely use a phone while the child is very savvy in jumping from here to there, internet, you name it. So some parents do have challenges. What advice would you give to a parent who isn't tech savvy? How do you keep track of your tech savvy teenager or younger child?
It's a good question, Sharad. Oh. Lean on the persons in your community. Remember, this is a communal space. So that you must know somebody who can assist you. Try and find someone who can assist you to police the tablets, the device. There are things that, as we mentioned earlier, you can put in checkpoints, screen time measures, all these things that are there. Ask someone for help.
And also, well, I was going to say I think there's apps out there where you actually can link device together. So whatever your child is watching, you actually have on your tablet or phone itself. But then you have children who are smart enough to go and create another email, will divert it somewhere else. But there is some ways, as I said, community. Have the conversation with other parents because we can't keep living in the past, right? YouTube, there's some videos you can watch where you can educate yourself. So that is just something, but I guess there's many more out there, right?
Question from the congregation again?
Yes, Jason here again. What we often find in situations like this, it's a continual game of cat and mouse.
Who is the cat and who is the mouse?
Well, most times the parent is the cat and the children are the mouse. So when we think we have put up all the barricades and different things, they find small holes to get around us. But it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. When you educate and equip your child and put it in them morally as to where to go, it helps in sometimes they will say, you know, because mommy tell me say, so and so, I'm not going to do it. Sometimes that is what
you have a few seconds to wrap up your comment.
Yes, so I think it's in equipping. What I wanted to mention is that to deal with these things that we're dealing with, we have to really be careful and ask God to guide us, because some of the things that persons use to deal with stress and trauma, Easter meditation, yoga, different things, and when you check it, a lot of these things open demonic doorways.
Indeed.
So we have to ask God to direct us in going about the best ways to solve the problems so that the gospel can go forward.
Thank you very much. So this has been a very interesting program, and we're coming to the end shortly. I see Darius is at the mic. Darius, go ahead.
Why I'm at the mic is that there are comments in the chat that they are saying that we need, just to make sure mention. So here in the chat, they said, moderate drinking is the school in which men prepare for the drunkard's career. Yes, we went through that. You move. So, talking about that, is it wrong for a kid to drink Smirnoff Ice and those liquor things? Is it something wrong? You want to answer that when I'm done? Or adult? Liquor things? Smirnoff parties? You're going to come to that. Starting with soft things. Next question. What do you do when you go home and meet your son emptying your water tank to sell it?
What?
So
someone emptying the water tank to sell it. Maybe somebody on drugs. We're going to come back to the Smirnoff Ice after. But I'm just bringing up some points in the YouTube chat. How do you deal with a kid who is selling you a gas tank to buy drugs.
They basically empty the water tank at home,
To
store
sell
the
it.
water to get money to finance what
to
they're
finance.
doing. How do you approach that?
All right, that's addiction, right? So,
Oh,
right, so, all right, so the child needs help. The child needs a specialist because that's addiction. And you see, when you become addicted to a substance, the most important thing is their substance. So not only some person will sell the water out of the water tank or the gas, we have many persons who sell themselves in order to support the addiction. When it goes to addiction, nothing else matters more than the substance itself. So you will do whatever. So first, that child know the reality. If it's a child, you can take that person to different Ministry of Health and different institutions, or can start the process of helping that person. However, if the person reach a particular age, it's a little bit difficult if the person doesn't want to come in for treatment themselves. So we have to understand that how counseling works is one of the not how it works, but one of the best way. If you want help, right? You can't help somebody who don't want to help themselves. We can start the process.
so you can't force help.
It's more successful when the person wants it than when you impose it on them.
Right. So there's a stage of change, right? And how we interact with different persons at different stage, what they might be on.
I want to address the one about exposure at an early age.
So exposure at an early age to
Right.
soft drinks. They're not the
To
real
alcohol.
everything.
Let's
And
just
we
say
want
to alcohol.
and I'm sorry if I called any brand,
It's
but
okay.
I apologize.
It's all
but
right.
to anything, you know, the soft thing, the lights.
Right. So what we know is that the earlier you expose a child to alcoholic beverages is the greater the risk that the child may go on to continuously drink it, may develop tolerance for it. What our studies show is that the average age of onset in Jamaica is 12 to 13. And majority of these 12 to 13-year-olds are exposed by their parents who say, take a sip.
But that's
Drink.
nothing new, is it?
It's not new. And
Because
the question was,
parents
is
and
it wrong?
grandparents used to do it ages ago.
Does that make it okay? I'm not sure. What the studies also show is that 1 in 5 of those who start using at a particular age go on to be problematic users. You don't know if your child is one of the 5. And therefore, the encouragement is delay onset as late as possible, because especially when they start before age 15, the likelihood that they will continue is higher. Now, culturally, we start early. We show our children how to drink from they are yay high. Does that make it right? It does not make it right. What we're doing is increasing the likelihood that they might have issues later on.
So you did indicate that a lot of times our children are introduced by the parents themselves. Okay. What about introduction to these things outside of the home? Do we have any idea as to how much of this does take place? Does it take place more in the home or outside the home, at school, at parties? Because you can't monitor your children 24/7, can you?
Right. So in 2013, we did a survey called the National Secondary School Survey. This was, again, among children in grades 8 to 13. And what it showed is that alcoholic beverages were mostly consumed at social events and sporting events, while ganja was mostly consumed at their friends' homes and in the community. Now, does that tell you that they're not drinking at home? It doesn't say that. But the likelihood that they'll drink at social events, parties, and otherwise, even schools have complained that when they have sports day, there are children who will fill up them water bottle. And you think it's water in there, and it's not water. More than Heineken. But anyway, let's not call the names of it. Hard liquor. So we talk about beer, wine, hard liquor. They're drinking hard liquor.
So what do we do? Keep our children at home and just send them to school and church, and that's it?
Prevention Prevention is the way we go. Prevention.
Well, practically, what can parents do? Should we encourage parents to accompany their children, to chaperone their children at these events? It's not easy being a parent. You can control the things, well, you can try to control the things that happen under your roof. But once your child leaves the precincts of your home, you lose control. What can we as parents do practically?
You see that thing about relationship building? From early, it is very, very powerful and very important. If you have a close relationship with your child, where you talk to them about not only drugs, you talk to them about life. You are honest with your child. You talk to them about sex. You talk to them about predators. You talk to them about things that are not easy to talk about. A lot of us parents, we do not even want to even go near those topics. And so after the horse has gone through the gate, that is when we want to, pardon?
And bolted.
And bolted. That is when we want to start to say, you know you mustn't do this and you know you mustn't do that. And at that time, they're not listening to you. But if you have a close relationship with your child and you talk to them from a very early age, the likelihood that they're going to come home, can I just give you an example? I have adult children. And both of my daughters went to university abroad. And one of them called home when she went. She was way up in Maine, way up at the top of the US. And she said, Mommy, look at this. And she sent me a picture of a big bag of ganja that she had never seen before while she was living in Jamaica. She never saw ganja. But she went up there and saw it and said, oh my God, she was a resident assistant. And she said, oh my God, Mommy, look at this. And so, but the point I want to make is, if I didn't have a close relationship with her, she would not show me what all of these people are doing. They would tell me about the young people who were drinking themselves to sickness. So I just want to say that to say, strong relationships, good relationships are protective for many things. Protective for drug use, protective for risky sexual behavior, protective for, reckless behavior. We have to start getting closer to our children.
I think that's a very important point, extremely important. Mrs. Giles? Bring the mic a little closer to your mouth because we can't hear. Project.
Are you hearing me? Okay,
Loud and
all
clear.
right. Okay, thank you. Yes, so very interesting and timely discussion, I would say, and I, really endorse, just about everything that you have been saying there. And much has been said about self-care and about being preventive. Could you share with us some practical tips as to what kind of self-care could we advise, whether young persons or parents or caregivers? Practically, what can we do when we talk about self-care?
I'll give an example of how my self-care, based on what I do, is a very stressful job. And I experience a lot of what I call secondary trauma now. So for me, I am no good to my family if I'm no good to me. Like I do a lot of, this is just one tip, I do a lot of gardening. So for me, I've done the study, when you interact with dirt or so, you actually release some chemical, release serotonin, what makes you feel better. Yes, the science is there. So it's like if you ever meet a gardener who not just go and cut flowers, but really no dirt, they actually feel good. There's always something about that person. So for me, I'm a gardener and that helps me a lot. So if I'm no good to my family, to myself, I'm no good to my family. So it starts with me. So that is just one example what I use of self-care for myself, right? I have to detach from everything to focus on me so that I can be better for everybody around me. So that's just one tool.
So there are lots of strategies that, especially post-COVID, that we had to be doing: exercise, meditating, engaging in games, talking with loved ones, with friends, praying. There's a whole host of things that you can do. You know, nature walks.
Just hearing
Take
water
breaks,
actually
getting
relax
enough
the brain.
sleep. I mean, just getting proper sleep. You know, many times when us doctors take a vacation, you know what lots of the doctors do? They go and do more work somewhere else.
That's true, that's true.
So we need to learn to take breaks. So, you know, self-care is very important. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Jason has a comment. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, so you know about conversion theory, right?
Conversion theory?
Yeah, the battle against conversion theory. Now, the UN is about to decriminalize pedophilia, which goes in line with what the gentleman spoke about earlier with the 19-year-old that has the stock full of child pornography. So, in light of those and what we see is happening with the LGBT community, how, as Christians, are we going to equip our families and other relevant individuals to deal with the coming crisis ahead? Because guess what? If we don't touch it, many souls are going to get lost and we are going to be held accountable for it. So how, let's give a few steps, how we could deal with the coming crisis.
Jason, I think that's a program on its own, to be honest. That is a program on its own, but something that needs to be addressed. You had a comment there, Brother Murray? No. Okay. So this evening, we were really focusing on things that hijack our health. We spent a lot of time talking about addiction, substance addiction, and how we can identify signs and symptoms of substance addiction and what we can do about it. But I indicated at the start of this program, there is a part 2, because in part 2, we're going to be focusing solely upon how we manage and address addiction. So if at the end of our program this evening, you are still left with questions about how to manage substance addiction, what to do, whether it's personally or in a family member or a friend, then you're going to have to tune in next week, Sabbath, same time, same place, for us to address the management of substance addiction and addiction in general squarely. But I think we've had a very good evening this evening. And in wrapping up, just before our Vesper thought, I want to give each of our panelists 2 minutes, just to, that's a long time, just to condense what you think is the most important point or pointers that you want to leave our congregation and our online audience with regards to addiction. Where should I start? I see, let's start with Daniel. Yes, let's start with Daniel and then move around. Go ahead, Daniel.
All right. So I look at, let me use a person who smokes ganja as a leaf on a tree. We have to treat the root causes in many ways. So there's different reasons why persons use substances. Curiosity, peer pressure, stress, depression, a whole bunch of different reasons. So we have to deal with, in many cases, the underlying cause. For me, a lot, I guess based on my discipline, how I see life is I look through a trauma lens. So trauma-informed care. So a lot of things that we experience today is linked to our past. A lot of persons are still stuck in the past. So we need to understand, how do we remove ourselves in such a way from the past so that we may embrace the present? Because the future is not 10 years from today now. The future is right now. The future is this very second, with changes. So what I do today changes tomorrow. So we need to start take responsibility for our lives and heal from those emotions. Some of the persons what have hurt us had died long time ago and gone. But yet they're still living in our head, the thoughts. Right? Doc mentioned about epigenetics. This thing goes way back. So there is a conversation that we need to start, and we need to start talking to our children because our children are hurting because the parents are hurting. So I need to help me so I can help my child. So we're talking about holistic approach to health, where in many cases people say it's taboo to say, boy, I am not well. So make we normalize talking about mental health. Let's normalize talking about, boy, I may need some help. Right? Because if you don't, you're going to be stuck this version of who you are for the next 20 years. So we're stuck in time, or we're stuck in a loop, or we're stuck in a memory. Let us break the cycle so that we may heal and move forward.
Thank you, Daniel.
20 seconds. I don't need 2 minutes. All right. I would like to just say, yeah, clap, Daniel. All right. I would like to say, pick up where Daniel left off. Seeking treatment for difficulties that we have is not a sign of weakness. There's a sense in which us as Jamaicans, we're kind of proud and we don't want nobody to think so we can't manage ourselves or manage our life. And we see going to a mental health or substance abuse counselor as weak. What I would like to do is encourage those of us who may have challenges to go for help, because there is a solution to the issues that you're facing. That's one. Two, there's also a sense in which we don't want to get involved in anybody else's business. So we may see young people around us doing things and we turn a blind eye to it. My encouragement is get involved. I don't know where we lost our way in terms of the village and caring for the village, but we have lost that. And my encouragement is, instead of saying, why am I picking that, so I'm in a business. Or the children nowadays, if me go talk to them, they're not even going to listen to me, so I'm leaving them alone. My encouragement is, let us get out of that and go back to the days where we see a young person doing something, let us try and talk with them. If we can't speak with them, try and speak with their parent, or try and get them some form of intervention, because it can go a long way. That's it.
Thank you very much.
All right, so they've said most of everything, right? So just in summary, addiction is a relapsing medical condition, right? And we use this thing called the trans-theoretical model, where it is common for persons to fail, to try and abstain from what they were doing, that harmful behavior. It's common for them to fail and return to that. They try to stop, they maintain it for a little while, they relapse. So they have to sometimes cycle several times through that cycle before they get it right. And so it's for us, as I said, the village, to support them, to provide that canvas, that space for them to heal, to recover. And we have to, of course, encourage the government to put in the things that's necessary, policy and enforcement, to try and protect our children and ourselves. And some of these things take time, but there are practical things we can do to reduce the stigma, to self-care, and we encourage that to prevent further addiction.
Thank you very much. So a very special thanks to the members of our panel this evening. This was a very practical discussion about addiction, things that are hijacking our health. I want to thank Daniel Brown. Oh, I'm going to have to go back to my phone for that. Daniel Brown, substance abuse specialist, Uki Atkinson, Uki, research analyst, and Dr. Craig Radlin, who is our psychiatrist. Thank you very much for a very engaging conversation. I think the information that has been disseminated this afternoon has been very useful. I have learned, and I'm sure persons sitting among us and tuning in online have also received a lot of important information, which I think goes a long way in terms of addressing some of the problems of addiction and substance abuse that we have in our communities. We have more. But at this point in time, we are going to turn over to Sister Pottinger Giles, who is going to lead us through Vespers, and then we will wrap up after the Vesper thought. Sister Giles. Give them another clap again, please.
Okay, so greetings again. And for Vesper Thoughts, I would like to bring your attention to the words of 2 Timothy 1, verse 7. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind. So we have been gifted with the spirit of power, of love, of a sound mind. And the biblical concept of a sound mind comes from the Greek word sophronisomos, meaning disciplined, self-control. Yes, really. So we have been gifted, and we have been given this wonderful gift. Question is, what do we do with a gift? So when we really appreciate a gift, we cherish it, we carefully use it, because we do not want to lose it. We make sure that the giver can see how much we appreciate it. We use it to bless ourselves, and we use it so that the giver can enjoy the joy of giving as well. And so the question is, how can we use this gift of power, this gift of love, this gift of a sound mind? Romans 8, verse 9 says, it tells us, but we are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. If so, that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. Now, if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his. And then the NIV version has it, you are, however, not controlled by the sinful nature, but by the Spirit. If the Spirit of God lives in you, you are controlled not by the sinful spirit or the sinful nature, but by the Spirit, if the Spirit of God lives in you. And if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, he does not belong to Christ. And Romans 8, 13 to 14 continues, using the same version. For if you live according to the sinful nature, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of the body, you will live, because those who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. So the gift of the Spirit of power, that's the gift that we got. The gift of the Spirit of power, the gift of the Spirit of love, the gift of the Spirit of a sound mind gives us nature over sinful, gives us power over sinful nature. And this is done, so it gives us the power over addiction, gives us the power over, these bad habits that we have developed. It gives us the power over the effects of trauma. It gives us the power over the challenges that we have been speaking about here this evening. And all of this power, we get to do these things through the love of God and the ability to make right choices. That is, we choose to live godly and righteously in this sinful world. But I pause here to say that we do have a responsibility. With everything that we have been given, we have a responsibility. And so, in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 461, it tells us we have a work to do to resist temptation. Those who would not fall prey to Satan's devices must guard well the avenues of the soul. They must avoid reading, seeing, or hearing that which will suggest impure thoughts. The mind should not be left to wander upon every subject that the adversary of souls may suggest. And Philippians 4, verse 8 says, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. And Psalm 119, verse 9 and 11 says, and wherewith shall a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed thereto according to thy word. Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. So as we go through this week, I really would like, to implore us that we can focus on our minds and our thoughts in spite of the challenges around us, the addictions, the different issues that we face on a day-to-day basis, the issues with our children, that we can bring to our minds that whatever the things that are true, the things that are honest, the things that are just, that are pure, that are lovely, that are of good report, that bring virtue and that bring praise to the Almighty, that we will focus on these things and that we'll keep the Word of God close within our heart, that we will have them in our hearts, because these are the way that we are going to receive that gift, that we are going to utilize that gift. We have been given the gift, but we have to use the gift that we have been given. And so we have to recognize and appreciate that gift, and so hide the words of the Lord in our heart, that we may not sin against him. I hope that as we go through this week, that we can really focus on these things, and that we will be blessed, and that as we continue with the rest of the program too, that we continue to receive of the blessings that the Lord has in store for us, and that he'll guide our footsteps throughout the week. Let us pray. Okay. Okay, I'm hearing that I should just go to Savior, breathe, and evening blessing.
And what we come confessing, thou canst save and thou canst heal. Amen.
Oh, dear Father, we thank you, dear Lord, that you are our God. We thank you that you are the giver of all good gifts. Dear Lord, as we bow before you now, we pray, dear Lord, that you will just come divinely near unto us. We pray, dear Lord, that you will help, that we will recognize your love and your goodness towards us. Dear Lord, help that we will recognize the gift of your Son. Help, dear Lord, that we will recognize the gift of every good thing that you have given unto us, dear Lord. The blessings of the Sabbath that has just come to an end, dear Lord. And the gift of another week. Dear Lord, as we contemplate, all the challenges that face us, dear Lord, help that we will focus on that which is good, that which is pure, that which is holy, dear Lord, that which is righteous. Help, dear Lord, that we will hide your words in our hearts. Help, dear Lord, that they will become life unto us. And that, dear Lord, as we go through this week, dear Lord, that we will be good examples to our families, dear Lord. Help that we'll take care of the gift that you have given us, dear God. The gift, dear Lord, of this body, of this temple of yours, dear Lord. Help that we will care for it in the appropriate way. You have given us your guidelines, dear God, and sometimes we do abuse this temple, dear God. Help, dear Lord, dear God, that you will forgive us of all the misdeeds that we have committed within this body. And help, dear Lord, that we will look to you, dear God. We ask that you will fill us with your spirit, dear God, and help that all that we say, all that we do, and all that we think will be in accordance with your divine will, dear God. We ask, dear Lord, that you will guide every family that is here. We ask, dear Lord, that you will bless our young people, our children, that you will bless the parents, that you will bless the caregivers, and help, dear Lord, that we will first, dear Lord, that we will look to you, dear Lord, for every guidance, and help, dear Lord, that we will follow your will, and that whatever, dear Lord, that we do and say, that, dear Lord, that you will bring honor and glory unto your name, and that souls will be saved in your kingdom. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.